is the industry leader in both service and unique events in the TCG arena. Whether it's running the largest community-run tournaments for Flesh and Blood or providing service with a generosity that is unique to the Realm games, you can count on the Realm for an unforgettable experience. Check out their website at realmgamingnetwork.com for details about their $50,000 Flesh and Blood tournament circuit happening all across North America. But check out everything else going on at the Realm, including tournaments for all kinds of other experiences. And just for you, ISP listeners, use the code INSTANT5, that's INSTANT 5, to get 5% off your checkout when you're buying from the Realm. The Instant Speed Podcast welcomes a former professional card player who has been a respected broadcaster at the highest ever echelon of tournaments around the world. He is also the person that you tweet at when you're mad that a frostbite is what is responsible for your 2-5 record at Battle Hardens. His latest world tour has brought him to the Pitch Perfect podcast, the Living Legends podcast, and he is also old enough to have possibly been on Johnny Carson. So welcome to ISP, Bryan Gottlieb. You know who I'm talking about. You absolutely 100% know who Johnny Carson is. Don't lie to me.
I would have been young, but probably a functional enough guest for Johnny Carson. Probably not the youngest guest he ever had, so fair enough.
You could have done Star Search maybe with Ed McMahon. I mean, they're kind of all intertwined. Yeah. You would have been like a 4 3/4 stars. Bryan Gottlieb. And then you go.
I don't know if I was worth that many stars. Like, I don't really have any talents per se. Like, I just kind of exist and middle along, and it seems to get me by. But I don't know if I could accumulate any stars on Star Search.
You would have gotten some stars. Like, don't screw around. Like what were you gonna do? Just drop in there and like, hey, check this out. I didn't no mulligans, 3 lands, Delver, let's go. Like, I don't.
It seems like worth at least a star.
Absolutely, yeah. Ed McMahon is like, hi-oh, and then just you're gone. Who was your favorite late night show host?
Man, I wasn't a huge fan. Like if I had to choose one, it would probably be like Conan O'Brien. But I wasn't a huge fan of anyone in the circuit. And like Conan, I did go to a live taping of Conan once, which was quite a bit of fun. It was. Michael Clark Duncan was one of the guests. Christopher Walken was another guest.
That's a pretty solid lineup, yeah.
And then the Scissor Sisters played. So it was like overall like a really solid show. I had a good time.
Do you know who the guests are when you like get these tickets? Or is it a surprise when you just like walk into the venue and you have no idea?
It was a surprise. It was I didn't get the tickets first. Like someone, I think actually the girl I was dating at the time got them. But I don't have any recollection. I feel like we knew when we were going down there because they like announced the shows for the week or whatever.
Right.
But I don't think we knew when we got the tickets.
Okay. I've always wondered that because I've always wanted to go on one of these shows, but in my mind I'm like, if it's like Michael Cera and I don't know, Jesse Eisenberg, it's like, okay, that's the same person. Like, what a waste of a show.
Yeah.
Conan was my favorite and still is. When people ask me, who are your quote unquote idols in terms of broadcasting, I always say Vin Scully, in terms of like his play-by-play and that kind of dynamic. But in terms of interview skills, Conan O'Brien is an absolute just master at it. He is so damn good.
I was surprised how small the studio was. That was actually the most striking. Like, it was just very, very tiny. Shockingly tiny.
Yeah, because they're like filming Survivor, like in the next room. Like they don't have much real estate there.
Yeah, you have to fit a whole island in the studio. So.
Exactly. And then when you're voted off, you just literally go from Studio A to Studio B and talk to Conan O'Brien. Yeah,
perfect.
While you still smell like smoke and BO. It's the best thing ever. All right, so we're here for a reason. I don't know what it is because...
Are we?
I think so.
Are we sure about that?
Well, it was funny because like I literally ahead of this, I was playing Overwatch with Tannen, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what the hell I'm going to talk to Bryan about because Bryan's literally been on the Beyonce world tour. Like, I don't know, you're on like the Elton John farewell tour or something, but you've been on all the stuff. I don't know what you've said on them. This isn't like an indictment towards them. It's purely just the fact that I don't have enough time to listen to everything. But I got some questions for you. I just kind of parsed back on some of the obvious ones I think that everyone wants to know. Like, I'm sure you've already said what your favorite card is from Outsiders a billion times. So just get that out of the way. What's your favorite card from Outsiders?
It's Azuri, hero that James gave me credit for designing. I don't like taking credit for these things, but he specifically said like the hero you designed is going to be like the headliner of this set. So I guess I have to take the credit. He's been trying to get me to take more credit recently. I just am not comfortable doing that because I don't feel like I don't know. It's just such like a group process. I don't ever want to take credit for things, but he gave me that credit specifically, so I guess I'll hold on to it. Azuri definitely at least had a genesis with me, and it's my favorite hero to play too. And I think it's going to be a lot of people's favorite hero to play. And she's just such like a badass character. She's loads of fun, and I'm really, really proud of the way she turned out.
I've watched enough Sopranos in my life to know that the boss never does any of the like, you know, he doesn't even drive his own car. He needs to stay away from the actual day to day. He'd sort of separate himself. But Uzuri is a lot of fun. I got to play Uzuri at the pre-release, which was great. I don't know if you're a big poker player. Have you always been a poker player in your past?
I was a professional poker player. I dropped out of college my first time to play poker. I was making so much money playing poker. I'm like, I don't ever have to go to college. What are we doing here?
See that, children? This is what professionals do. They just...
But I went back, Flake. I went back, and then I also went to law school. So I did drop out at first, but I went back. So good lesson for all the kiddos out there.
I also dropped out, and I went to bartend, and then I went back to school as well. So it all comes full circle.
I bartended after I graduated college. Like I had my degree, and then I started bartending. So
the dots are kind of similar. They're just misaligned right now in terms of our because I'm gonna get my law degree like this weekend. So
okay,
bird law is what it is. It's definitely
perfect.
Some Charlie Day bird law. All right, so let's dig into this one again. Outsiders is coming around the corner. The pre-release is all tucked away. I went to 2 of them, had a great time. Uzuri, when I asked about the poker, is because there's a lot of bluffing with Uzuri, and that's awesome. Was there inspiration from your poker past when it came to Uzuri's design?
Look, it's really hard for me to like pinpoint inspirations. I think all of my gaming experiences are always going to be my influences, right? And certainly like the fact that I leaned heavily into poker for a while has a lot to do with it. I think there's elements of Magic present in Uzuri. There's just like a huge collection of influences. Now, at the same time, it felt like an entirely novel creation. Like I wasn't like, I want to make a poker hero or I want to make a hero that is similar to this mechanic. It felt like something that fit the character, that was unique for what we were trying to do. But I am very cognizant of the fact that everything I've experienced in gaming will always shape what I produce in gaming. So.
And we got a metric ass load of questions, and so I'm going to try to get as many of them in here. And for all those who did submit questions, I took what I could. Also, if I don't give you credit, I'll try my best. But we've got a lot of duplicates, but ultimately I'm going to do my best to give credit where credit is due. And the first question is from Jim. Jim asking essentially, how much playtesting is done before a set is essentially deemed ship it ready, as it were? How many, how much gameplay, like even when you feel it's finalized, when the last I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and you're like, all right, no notes, but now we need to play. How many hours or games do you feel is adequate before you're like, you know what, we got this?
Yeah, I think the industry term is a fuckload is the exact amount required. And even that being said, all the time we put into testing, the broader community is going to obliterate the time we spent within the first hour of the set being released. Like you just can't ever get enough games. And that's why you have to also rely on instinct. Like you're never going to have sample sizes enough to tell you everything. You have to be able to make some conclusions, to make some leaps. And that's also where a lot of vulnerability in the process comes from, which of course there's always vulnerability in card design. It's always possible you step too far, make something too strong, mess something up. That's always going to be there. And a lot of that is just based on sheer available reps. There's only so much you can do before you actually have to send out the set. So it's a lot of effort. It's a bunch of people putting in that effort. but it is very worth noting that it is immediately dwarfed by the broader public getting their hands on the set.
You've been heralding this set as an all-star within the limited format since I think I started pestering you back at U.S. Nationals. I also, now that you're here, I want to go on record. I accurately predicted dual class cards like 4 or 5 months ago. Is this correct or not?
You did.
Yes.
You did.
Damn right I did.
You messaged me. I was like, neither confirm nor deny, but I do remember the message, and you absolutely were correct. So
beauty. So do you feel like some of the feedback that has come out is that the sealed, like from a perspective of sealed, everybody has mixed opinions about it, but it's draft. I think that this was probably designed for limited, and sealed is rather a whole different beast. You get 6 packs, you build what you can, but draft, there's a little bit more agency in terms of how you can actually fine-tune your deck to build it to your design. Somebody like David Rude, for example, has mentioned that, sealed was not necessarily his cup of tea, but he did 1 or 2 drafts and he was like, this feels great. Was the design for Outsiders as being this behemoth of a limited set more geared towards just 90% of our efforts are to make sure that it's an exquisite drafting experience? Do you guys even care about sealed at all, or is all the focus on draft as the limited baby?
We absolutely care about sealed, but it's more as an introduction to the product and what it's capable of producing in limited than like, this is the thing that we really want to be the hallmark experience. That is very much draft, especially for this set where the draft set just absolutely shines. Sealed is a format in Flesh and Blood that can be a lot of fun. I really enjoyed my time playing sealed with Outsiders. I've enjoyed my time with other Flesh and Blood sealed formats. The true deepest experience of a Flesh and Blood limited set is going to be in the draft arena every time. It's what we spend the most time on. It's what our focus is absolutely on. And, I think to me, I don't think you experience my vision of the limited aspect of Outsiders until you are drafting. I think there is an introduction and there's fun to be had in the sealed space, but Outsiders limited to me is draft.
I am really excited for it. Again, I love limited. Sealed is one thing. It's great. I don't mind it, but drafting is a whole other experience. I feel like I'm doing something to a degree. It's not just all left to the cosmos to sort of open it.
One thing I'll say, Flake, is like, I'm happy to go and play like 4 or 5 sealed events. I think that's cool. And I think that'll get me a good range of experiences and I can have a very good time with that. I am happy though to do 100 drafts. Like, I will sit anytime my friends want to get together and draft, I will do that forever. And I think the shelf life for the sealed experience is just a little bit shorter, a little bit more condensed. And that's fine. I think that's completely fine for sealed to have that role in our game and for draft to continue to be our hallmark limited format. When we go to Baltimore soon, draft is the focal point, right? Like, for these top level competitive players, that is where they're going to be honed in on. And I know the drafts are already starting amongst Pro Tour teams. I know they're already working on it. I'm getting good feedback from some of those folks as well. So I'm really excited to see what the best Flesh and Blood players in the world do when they unlock this limited format.
Well, that leads into our next question here from Tariq Patel, who is the reigning Canadian national champion, former U.S. national champion, also a long-standing and suffering Maple Leafs fan. There's another Game 7 loss, I believe, coming in just a couple months that he's going to have to endure. I'm sorry, Tariq. Ultimately, though, 14-card packs, was there any, because we're coming down from 15, if I'm not mistaken, or possibly even more.
We were 14 and Uprising as well.
Oh, we were? Okay. So so the question here is 14, is it too low or just right? I would imagine that Uprising and drafting Uprising at 14 cards, drafting Uprising and drafting Outsiders, I feel are going to be completely different experiences because, in Uprising, you felt really painted to a corner after your 3rd or 4th pick. You kind of have to commit. So 14-card packs is not so bad. If everyone's drafting and sort of isolating themselves to a particular class or hero, then the cards should feel okay as they come around. Doesn't mean you have much room to pivot. But a 14 card pack with so many different options, is 14 the right number? Are you was going above and going maybe to 15 cards ever on the menu?
Yeah, we played with 15 cards. I think we'll probably play every limited format ever with 15 cards, and we'll see if that works. And the answer, at least these last few sets, is that it has not been the correct call to go to 15 cards. And I think that's for a multitudinous reasons. There's multiple pressure points in a game of Flesh and Blood. One can be deck size, not only your deck size, but your opponent's deck size. And as you add more cards to the limited card pools, deck size can increase. You can sort of have these pile strategies where you just throw a bunch of cards together, and that can be problematic. The other thing too is like, I've heard this discussion of 15 card packs and how it would have solved Uprising and the lane issues. It's kind of nonsensical to me. Like, so you add 3 more cards to the draft overall, per pack, per player. And so basically each player gets 3 more picks. They should be on average a red, a yellow, and a blue. How much longer do you think you can stay open in Uprising draft if you go ahead and add 3 more cards to the total experience?
I think the question there is also the fact that there weren't as many generics, I think, that were going to help you out. You're always going to be painted into a corner because Icelander, it's generic, or Wizard / Ice. Like, there wasn't much.
I agree with you 100%, Flake. And that was the nature of Uprising. That was the experience it was designed to give. And I can understand, like, not loving that experience and wanting a more open flowing draft process. And in fact, a lot of like that desire, my own desire to see that come to fruition, was what informed Outsiders. But we can do both. We can have formats that look like Uprising. We can have formats that look like Outsiders. And it's not actually the number of cards in a pack that is shaping that. It's the construction of the draft format. So, to Tarek, I would say go ahead, draft the set, and see if you think it needed an additional card to open it up. Because number one, I don't think the additional card would have achieved that to a greater degree than it presently is. And number two, I think this experience is open as shit. Like, you can go ahead and have no idea what class you're in after pack 1, have no idea what hero you're playing after pack 2, and end up with a very good deck. And this isn't conjecture. This is something I have done a bunch of times. It's a mode of drafting I'm very comfortable with. And it's just a completely different experience than Uprising. And that's not to say like the Uprising experience was wrong or flawed. It was different. And if that wasn't your cup of tea, I do totally understand that. Because for me, I would rate Uprising as one of like the lower limited formats in terms of how much I enjoyed it. I did enjoy quite a bit of Uprising, but I put it below something like Tales, below something like WTR, below something like Monarch. And that's not to say there's not value in that set, but it was a different type of experience and had very little to do with the size of the packs that made it that way.
I haven't drafted it yet, but just by playing the sealed, what I've noticed is that even when I'm opening my pools and just putting everything by class or by card type, all, putting in front of me and just kind of getting a landscape of what I've got going on. Once I finally decided, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to play Uzuri because I want to try Uzuri. And then once I put the cards aside that I just are illegal to play, I had about, 2/3 or 3/4 of my pile that was still legal, and I had that kind of agency. And when you're trying to translate that to what draft is going to look like, I'm going to see a lot of cards deep into this draft that I can still pick and play. And should I want to pivot, I think that there's plenty of opportunity. I'm very excited for this. Like I said, you were heralding this as sort of like the second coming of like a amazing draft experience. I loved drafting Arya. I thought Arya is still my favorite set. It's phenomenal. And I'm getting those kinds of vibes with this, and I'm very happy that we're going down that route. One of the things I did notice when I was opening packs, which was also noticed by one of the people who have submitted a question, was Thomas Vanderberg asking, the rare distribution has changed as well. And I got that. My first pack I opened was 3 rares. The second pack I opened was 1 rare. And yeah, it averages all out. But what's the logic behind that?
Yeah, so I don't want to go too much into like the specifics of how we ended up there. What I do want to say about it is serving a specific purpose within Outsiders. Like, it kind of had to be done that way for the packs to present the way we wanted them to. It is not necessarily something that you should expect to be the default mode of doing things. It was about achieving a very specific goal within Outsiders. And I think that's as much as I want to say about it. To the players who, feel like maybe a little slighted impact, the pull rates are very similar. I think they may be like slightly less per rare. They've changed a little bit from our last go around, but our pull rates are always in flux. Like they change on a set to set basis. So there really is no hard line. And if this particular set of pull rates did not work for you, I have a feeling that by the time we come around to the next set, we'll be looking at a different set of pull rates. And hopefully those are more inclined with what you're expecting to get out of your packs.
I dig it. Was there any card? This is a question that was asked by, again, a bunch of people. James Thurgood also asking this. Was there a card that was almost there but didn't quite make the cut? If you can't say specifically what it is, maybe you can say, it's on the back burner for a future set. Was there a card that like was the last sort of just didn't quite get in?
Yep, there was. And I feel like when a card ends up in that position, we're going to see it in the future. Like almost certainly it'll come back around. And if a card is that close to making it, it's probably not, structurally flawed or, I guess it's possible that a card is just like too strong when it's in that spot. Certainly that could be in the realm of possibility. But what's more likely is it just the theme that it was reinforcing was something that we're saving. We want to build out a little bit more in the future. An archetype that maybe we didn't quite want to unleash yet because we wanted to highlight another archetype. And 100% there were cards like that in Outsiders, and I think you'll see them down the road. They won't disappear forever.
I love it. Now that you're designing the cards as well, the biggest issue as card games essentially mature, as they establish themselves and more content gets put out, the biggest issue obviously becomes balance and such. Standard rotation is something that has existed for God knows how long. It's a practice that a lot of card games do. For those who don't know what standard rotation is, standard rotation essentially is the practice wherein cards are made illegal in the standard format as the calendar kind of progresses. Basically cards that are usually about 18 months to 2 years and up or older are rotated out of legality, and they then become legal in a different format. But that format typically is not played in the or it's not recognized as like the official format. Balance and trying to avoid potential standard rotation type things is a very delicate thing to have to curate. And now that you're on that side, I want to just dig in specifically to things that are getting a lot of chatter, which are fables. Fables have such a special attention that they need because they're so difficult to acquire. If they're desired, they become exceptionally expensive, wherein something like a Heart of Fyendal at its peak, maybe about 4 or 5 months ago or 3-4 months ago was at a $400 clip or so. And that's understandable. It's the rarest card. It also has a certain, allure to it. But when you're designing Plague Hive, how much with a fine-tooth comb are you just going over and saying, we need to get this just right? Was Plague Hive's final design anywhere close to what its initial design was? Or can you talk us through maybe the evolution of Plague Hive specifically?
I think the notes were similar. Like it was always kind of disease-based and token-based, and just the execution changed a bit over time. I think we're really good at making fables. Like I don't want to toot our own horn too much, but do you remember what the reaction was when Blood of the Drakai was first spoiled in Uprising?
There were, I don't want to say it was like over the top crazy, but even people like what I remember most is Corsham. Like people looking at Corsham being like, dude, this is really strong. And I think it was in one deck that ever top 8'd a tournament.
Yeah, and the reaction to Blood of the Drakai was polarizing for sure, but there were people who were making the same argument around it. Like, this card's going to be billions of dollars, and, I haven't looked recently. I know for a while it was actually quite cheap. Also, gem distribution has changed a lot with Fab 2.0. I think those fabled are maybe not as rare as they once were with the previous releases. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but I know I've opened more of them in recent times for whatever reason, and the prices seem lower as well. Like we really only have things like Blood of the Dracad to go on, but thus far it seems like there's a better job of getting more of these fabled out there for people.
Well,
And it's kind of one of those things where like we could spend a lot of time talking about it and like the potential problem it could present, and I think that's fine if there's a lack of awareness about the potential for problems.
right.
But I think everyone sees that, right? Like there is some world where things get out of control, and I think that steps are being taken to mitigate that. And until it actually happens, I kind of say the fables are a big net positive for our game. Like I was just on with our buddy Kellen, Red Zone Rogue, and we were talking about this as well. And like when I think back of the fables I've opened, I don't know if you've ever opened a fable before,
Nope.
but
Zero.
I've opened two, but like those are hallmark moments in my flesh and blood engagement, and I still remember them. Like I know exactly which two I opened. I know where I was. I know like basically what packs I was in. Like I opened my first fabled in the first ever box of WTR I ever bought. It was actually the first box of Flesh and Blood I ever bought. And I opened a heart and I had no idea what it was. And I'm like, oh, seems to be a pretty valuable card. And I put it in a sleeve, and then later found out I had done very well for myself. And then I opened a grandeur as part of my door prizes for a skirmish I went to. They gave us basically one pack of every set that existed at the time. And I opened my Everfest pack, and there is my cold foil grandeur of Valhalla. So like those two experiences, the fact that I can tell you where I got the packs that I pulled my fables from speaks to what an important part of the collecting process it is. And I think it serves a lot of players very well to have those cards exist. It brings down prices of other staples by them being existed in the boxes and, you know, eating up a lot of the value of these boxes. So I just don't see them as a problem as of now.
I want to push back a little bit on the thing, because you're talking, you're using Blood of the Drakai as kind of a barometer in terms of the value. You're saying that the value goes down to Blood of the Drakai, but that's because it's in no competitive decks. Whereas once Michael Hamilton won Worlds, the price of a heart went from 200 spiked up to plus like 300 plus, which is now hovering in the 400 range. I think that the scary part is when it becomes playable, not necessarily overpowered. It's not like for instance, if Command and Conquer was fabled, forget it. Like it would be unreal. It'd be the worst decision. It'd be quite toxic in terms of how that is printed. But I get that. I want to go back to what you mentioned where, there's mixed feelings about Plague Hive. And I think that's the right thing. When people, because I've heard that it's busted, and I've heard that it's garbage. And this is all within the same kind of time frame with, tweets that are 15 minutes apart or saying saying this kind of different thing. I've played with it. I enjoy it. I think it's a good card. Is it make or break? No. But do you not feel like it's a no-win situation? Because the second you make a fabled card, even just at rate, slightly above rate, the price is immediately going to skyrocket. Like, is that a concern that you guys worry about? And you mentioned about your own experience pulling it, and you're saying like this is a great part for me collecting, but it's not just about collectors; it's also about players, right? How do you balance that? That's a big one. That's a big one. That's not in the notes. So
no, I was trying to avoid telling the same story that I just told on Kellen's podcast, but I have to tell it because it is the answer to this question for me.
Let's do it.
And I point back to a tweet made by my good friend Patrick Sullivan, notable Magic content creator, designer, game designer for decades now, has been involved with the OG like Upper Deck games, worked for Wizards of the Coast, worked on just every conceivable card gaming space you can imagine. And I love this tweet that he put out probably years ago now, but basically he starts feigning outrage and he says it is absolutely preposterous that these dual lands as a game piece in a game I want to play with my friends as a piece of cardboard should cost $400. It's completely unacceptable. They should cost $200 instead. And do you see like how ridiculous that is? Like, where do you draw the line? We're engaging with a hobby that has collectability as part of its core. And like, yes, I understand there is a difference in value between $400 and $200, but ultimately they're all luxury purchases. They're all just pieces of cardboard that should have no intrinsic value, but we've assigned value to them because we love them. And that's how these things get to this point where it's like, oh, we want to have this. And like, is it a problem if you need these cards to compete at the highest level of the game? To me, absolutely not. Because if you're willing to compete at the highest level of the game, you're going to buy your plane ticket, you're going to get your hotel, you're going to buy the hundreds of dollars of other cards in your deck as you take on this luxury hobby. And then you can go over to your friends at Kayfabe Gaming or whoever your store of choice is, and you go, I will take one Heart of Fyendel, please, for $400. And you take it, you go play your tournament, and you walk over to them after the tournament, and you said, I am done with this Heart of Fyendel. Would you like to buy it? And they go, yes, we'll take it for $325. So yes, you lost $75 there, but how much did your flight cost? How much did your hotel cost? Like, it's all part of engaging with the game on this level. And to say one expense goes too far where all these other ones don't, it's just kind of arbitrary to me. And also, like, coming back to the direct point of Blood of the Drakai, my point is that we know what happens when those OG Fables become playable. We don't know what happens with this new wave of Fables becomes playable. Like, if Blood of Drakai was playable, what does its price look like? I can't answer that question. Right. And I don't think anyone else can either. So we kind of have to see that play out first before I'm willing to say it's an absolute problem. And I don't want to come off as callous to financial restrictions to gaming. It's a huge, huge thing. I totally embrace the idea that I want as many people to enter our spaces as possible. I want as many people to play this amazing game as possibly can. But there's always going to be these barriers to entry. And in some ways, I think it's almost like, and don't take this as a shot because I'm not directing this at you. This is more of a broader perception issue. And I'm guilty of it myself. But when you do something like distinguish a $400 card being a problem, but a $50 card not being a problem, that's really like dismissive of people who deal with actual poverty, who are just precluded from engaging with gaming in any sense whatsoever, right? Like, there's a bigger issue where they couldn't even think to have the free time to even game because their entire life is focused on survival and paying bills and just being able to get by from day to day, where it's like, these are very first world problems. If you're able to engage with the game in the first place, it just seems like really weird to die on this hill. And it's so hard to have this conversation without coming off as dismissive, because I'm not dismissive. I do think it is like a real thing to talk about and it's worth being cognizant of. But I do think the issue gets overblown and overstated and kind of amplified because it makes for really exciting, like, clickbaity type topics and things that really inflame passions. I'm sure you can tell me talking about this now, I'm passionate about it because there are multiple sides to it. And, I think that's why it often takes off as a good internet conversation.
My man, I've already done the unfair edits in my mind of you just talking about how poor people should not play card games.
Perfect.
And
I can't wait.
Yeah, I'll creatively edit it to talk about how children should be food or something. Like, I don't know what the hell. Yeah, you got it. But it's incredible because you're not wrong. First world problems are usually most of what my tweets are. If I've come to a point in my life where the paper that touches my ass better be 3-ply or there's going to be an issue. Like, it's,
like that's the nature of what we're talking about here. We're talking about this thing in our luxury hobby being $100 too expensive. It needs to be $100 cheaper so I can buy it for $100 and not $200. And it's just like, I don't know that this actually matters all that much. Like, I just don't think it does.
Dude, I'll walk into a tournament and I'll see somebody playing like Marvel Command and Conquers against me, and I'm like, it must be nice. Meanwhile, my Oldham sideboard is like $1,100, and it's like that. I completely get it, which kind of then leads down the line regarding the decision, which a lot of people thought was just right. Like, I thought that myself thought that you guys hit it right on the head when you guys were introducing Fables as Marvel reprints. I thought that was a very, very bullseye kind of decision to make the Command and Conquers with the new, the cold foiling, the extended art. They're gorgeous. They're beautiful. Obviously, I didn't open one, but nonetheless, is this something that you guys are going to revisit? Is it something that you guys are alternating with gems? Is it kind of... this is not to say that you guys are out of ideas, but I'm just saying, like, if you guys don't necessarily have the perfect flavored gem or something that will be associated with a particular set, is the Fabled slot just automatically going to be a desirable card in a reprint? Or, what's the logic in terms of how frequently we're going to see those?
Yeah, I think to some extent we're like kind of moving outside of my field of input when it comes to this stuff, but I can just give you my opinion on it. I don't think it's more you do a reprint Marvel where you don't have a gem to offer. I think it's more you do a reprint Marvel where that's like the coolest, most thematic thing you could put in the set. And with Dynasty having the Emperor present, directly referencing Command and Conquer, the Emperor appearing on the original Command and Conquer, I think gives just like a no-brainer home run for that to be the Marvel in that spot. And my expectation is if we did something once, it's probably on the table to do it again. If there's another spot where it makes sense to do that kind of Marvel reprint, I have to assume that's something we'll explore. But like I said, this is kind of outside the scope. And even like the last question to some extent, the Fabled question is sort of outside the scope to where my influence lies. Like I may influence the design of the Fable, but I have very little influence over like, should there even be a Fable? I just think like from my perspective, I quite enjoy the Fables. So like I'll share my perspective and what they've offered to my experience as a Flesh and Blood player more than as someone who's designing Flesh and Blood.
So this leads to power creep, and we were mentioning, a little about things like standard rotation. There's the Living Legend system, etc. But there's no real system right now that'll push cards into a different format and make them illegal in the current format, outside of obviously bans and restrictions, and the very, very rare, obviously, errata. However, power creep as it stands, and for those who are not aware what power creep is essentially the over time it's the powering up of a card, wherein before a 2-cost card was a 6 with a 3-block generic, and eventually became a 2-cost card which was like a 7 with a 3. That's just the natural progression of power creep in a nutshell. Ultimately, though, how restrictive is power creep, and how do you guys actively look to rein it in? It seems to be inevitable. You guys want to print cards that people want to play, want to collect, want to have, and eventually part of that is just saying, well, shit, I need to print a 6-cost generic card, but we already have 24 of those. What else are we going to do? What are we printing to make it better or make it more appealing? How do you guys reel in power creep?
There's a lot of things that Flesh and Blood is just doing better than other TCGs right now. A lot of things. It's one of the reasons why I was so excited to start working with them. I would put managing power creep very high on the list of things that I think we're doing an extremely strong job of. You go back to the Tales of Aria metagame and where things are sort of going at that moment. I think we did a really good job scaling down from there. And I keep talking about how it feels like we're starting to push into what I view in my mind as 2.0 for competitive Flesh and Blood, like the 1.0 being things like Starvo, Chain, Prism, Briar, Oldhim, I think is a fair inclusion. Icelander, I think is a pretty fair inclusion. Like to me, these are those heroes that are very much sitting at the apex of the history of Flesh and Blood. And I think we've done a good job of coming down a little bit from that point and still making really exciting sets, cards that people still really want to play with. And I think we're getting better at it too. Like there's no question that Dynasty was perceived as a pretty big step down in power level, I think. Now, I think there's going to be more to be said about Dynasty as time goes on. But in the moment, it seemed like a pretty big step down. And I think Outsiders were you to go back to things like maybe Uprising, but definitely Tails. It seems like a step down in power level. But I think we're getting to the point now where we're doing a good job of actually holding steady and making really exciting effects, heroes, and cards without just blowing power completely out the door. And that's so important, because if we just went down this path of power creep, things could get very bad very quickly. And I've seen too many TCGs come and go down that road, and it kills basically all of them every time, with one exception being Magic. And Magic has been able to endure through some just absolutely massive power creep. But they have changed what they are as a game. And the experience of playing, particularly a one-on-one game of Magic, is nothing like what it used to be previously. And for a lot of old heads like myself, we don't like it. Quite frankly, like, Magic has not been a game that I have been over the moon about for quite some time now. I think they've been degrading in what they offer me while doing more for other players at the same time. They very much changed their focus. So I think that power creep is always on our mind. It's always something that we're actively looking to avoid within reason, because I can say that, but I also think that Outsiders actually contains the greatest example of power creep in the history of our game. Do you know what I'm talking about, Flake?
The greatest power creep in the history of your game in Outsiders?
Yes.
Are you talking? It's
It's a tough question.
Well, okay. So the first thing that popped to mind is the quiver, which is just another.
You're 100% correct. You're 100% correct.
It's free equipment. Yeah.
Free equipment. We just added another equipment slot. But, like, at the same time, we were very judicious about it. And a lot of people, they saw the quivers and they were like, well, these are very tame. No, they're the greatest power creep in the history of the game. They're not tame whatsoever. They're a huge add for Ranger, and I think they really revolutionized Ranger as a class and totally redefine their capabilities. So, they had to almost read a little soft, because they are just pure power creep. And there's going to be moments where we choose to do that, but we're going to pick and choose very, very carefully, think about it very carefully, and understand what we're doing. We did not take the decisions to add quivers lightly whatsoever. That was a huge focal point of Outsiders, and I'm really happy with where we ended up with those effects, because I do think they are making a big difference to Rangers without just completely blowing power creep out the window.
I'm glad I got that. I'm usually an idiot when it comes to this stuff, so point for me. DM Armada is also chiming in, which is something that I wanted to talk about as well, but we both kind of had the same thought would process here, which is, how aggressively do you guys protect some of the staples like Art of War, Command and Conquer, E-Strike, because power creep could potentially kind of lean up against those cards, be it something along the lines of like, hey, Command and Conquer is a staple. It's a very powerful card. It does so much work. Ultimately, what if there was just, a rare version of it, like a rainbow version of it, where maybe it's not
Commander and Conqueror.
Exactly, commands and conquers, or maybe it's a rainbow version that's command or conquer. That's the power down of it. Ultimately, though, how aggressively are you guys looking to protect cards like those staples?
I don't think we want to protect those staples specifically. Like, that's not the goal, but I do think we view them as the upper limits of acceptable power, and making a card that was more powerful abstractly, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be in that space, just something which has the same effect on the game as Command and Conquer. And, like, let's just break down Command and Conquer's stats, right? 2 cost, red, 6 power, 3 defense, on hit, which is actually worth a full card in some scenarios, and a form of protection where it can't be interacted with by defense reactions. Like, that is a lot to put on a 2-cost generic card. And, I think we're still making exciting 2-cost 6 power generics. There's several in this set. You go back to Erase Face, which just came out. I think that was a very exciting one. We have effects like Amnesia in this set, which is certainly more niche, but, like, still an interesting disruptive effect. And then there's even something like Wreak Havoc, which has been talked about as an almost budget Command and Conquer. I think we're still finding really cool ways to explore these spaces. And it's not so much that we want to protect what these cards are doing. It's just about recognizing like those are the limits that our game system can bear, and pushing over that can present trouble.
Love it. You also mentioned something that made me smile because it's in my notes here, which is supplemental versus draftable. You mentioned Dynasty down the road, and the note that I specifically wrote out is Dynasty the phantom menace of fab sets in that we won't truly appreciate it until down the road? You said, like, you know, look, if I were to rank all the sets, to me, Dynasty is at the bottom. And that is purely because, frankly, you know, when you're evaluating sets, people are still really not fans of Everfest. And you go through the card list of Everfest, and sure, maybe the values of the cards are not all that great because it's been open to all hell and everyone has all the cards. But the amount of playables in Everfest is enormous. Nonetheless, Dynasty, it's kind of this... I don't want to say forgettable, but there was so much hype around it because it was... the tires were pumped for it around Worlds. It came out, and then it kind of was just like, you know, how much of that is because the set needs time to gestate, or how much of it is just because it's not a draftable set that people are still kind of, you know, a little bit so-so on it?
I think it's both. I think it's both working in conjunction. And I think that, you know, Dynasty set up a lot of things for the future. You can just look at the Assassin class, right? Like the Assassin class came to us and it was, you know, solid, functional, but sort of half realized. And I think we then get to Outsiders and you see a much more fulsome realization of what that class is capable of. You can point to something like even Azalea being present in Outsiders, and looking back at Sandscour Greatbow and the first of the Ain counters, several of those cards seem to me like they are poised to do really good things. A card like the Emperor, which is just going to get a larger and larger card pool as time goes on. Like, I think that card has tremendous potential over the long term. And there's just, the more you go through Dynasty and like really think about what these cards are capable of and what kind of spaces they could push into in the future, I think there's a lot of excitement left on the bones of that set. And, you know, I kind of understand why it lands where it does right now, but we kind of like the slow burn when it comes to Flesh and Blood. Like, we like setting something up to be out there and to have people thinking, and for it not quite to come to fruition, but you get a couple more sets under your belt and then it becomes all of a sudden top tier. And I think that's an exciting progression for a card game, which is based on the premise of not rotating, which is really unique. Like, I think a lot of times we approach these sets with the lens of players who are used to rotating models, who are used to like a standard rotation and new cards all the time. And what is this going to do immediately? Because it only has 18 months to make an impact. And then it has to be one of the greatest cards our game has ever seen. Otherwise, it's going to see no play.
Yeah.
Well, like, what about a future world where all these top tier heroes have started to fade out, and then Arachne's the only one left behind, right? Like, that world will exist at some point. That is a version of our game which will eventually come around. And I think that is the correct way to approach not only supplemental sets, but all sets in Flesh and Blood. Like, they just have a lot of room to grow over time.
I like that description because of the amount of times I've played games. For example, you know, I've played so much Gwent in my life, and Gwent didn't have a standard rotation. I was beating that drum for years and years and years. And the problem was that eventually they had to, every package of cards that they would release had to be what the meta was. It was, but it's like, here's 40 more cards, but this is the meta. Like, this is it. This is what you're playing. It's all baked in, the synergies, the archetypes. We have essentially just released the brand new meta. What I like,
Yu-Gi-Oh! Is another game that approaches things exactly that way.
Yeah, and that to me just destroys, you know, what you said, which is digging back into the past and finding cards that are synergizing well with the new stuff. And, you know, the best example of this is Mofos. Look at the Icelander list that Michael Hamilton put together, because everybody's Wounded Bulls were probably leveling out their coffee tables and had no clue that this was an actual, you know, playable piece outside of Limited. It was a card that had a very, very big presence in that particular list. And that's why it's hard to evaluate sets, I find. You know, you're going to see these set reviews. Set reviews are coming out, you know, every left, right, and center. I don't dare do them. I'm not smart enough to evaluate cards, because at the same time, you're basically trying to evaluate a card based on a snapshot of what's going on right now. But if Michael Hamilton decides to pull another rabbit out of his hat and create this random deck, suddenly the cards that you thought were garbage are now really good, because they're either countering what he's doing, or they're just as inherently good on their own, within that particular, that meta. And that's, like you said, with standard rotation, you can't do that because of that pocket of time. You need to release attractive things. So is Dynasty going to be good with Dusk Till Dawn? Is Dynasty going to be good? Because I'll be completely honest with you. It's kind of it's on the low end of the spectrum when it comes to impactful sets.
I hesitate to put a time frame on it, but I just look at the cards present in that set, and I see a lot of potential. And I would be surprised if it doesn't go through a renaissance in the future.
I like it. The other question that I have that a lot of people echo is, last year, 2 supplementals, 1 draftable. That was not what everybody kind of wants. We're getting 3 sets a year. I don't know if that's ramping up in the future. Ultimately, though, are things shifting towards a 2-in-1 draftable and supplemental, or is it going to remain 2 supplemental, 1 draftable? How is that that release schedule going to parse out down the line?
Yeah, I think James is the person who is best suited to field this question, but I try and watch everything he does, so I know what is safe for me to talk about, and
Gotcha.
like when I can parrot what he's said before. But he has often said that the goal is more draftable sets, and we are making progress towards that goal. More draftable sets are coming. I'm really excited for it, and I think all Flesh and Blood players should be excited for it as well.
But Dusk Till Dawn is not a draftable set, right?
I will leave you to scour the information available on Dusk to Dawn to answer that. I don't want to answer it directly because I don't know what we've confirmed and what we haven't.
I got you. No problem. Aggressively middling off of Discord also asking, when building a supplementary set, how much do you look at continuing a story versus improving poorer performing classes? That's a very good question, because to me, supplemental sets are out there essentially to basically, just kind of like Halloween, just give out candy to everybody who comes to the door, but some don't need it. Some are already, chubby and sugar riddled. So what is the goal of a supplemental set? Is the goal to bolster classes that are weak, or is it just part of the grander lore of Flesh and Blood?
It depends on the supplemental set, and I think that to say that there is a rule for how supplemental sets are supposed to work, and that would be flawed just based on the evidence, right? Like we have Dynasty, which introduced a whole new class to Classic Constructed. That had never happened before in a supplemental set. It feels like every supplemental set we're doing something for the first time. And a lot of that is us exploring what's possible in a supplemental set, seeing what we can fit in. And I think that trend will continue, where we continue to experiment with what is possible within the confines of a supplemental set. And the goals are going to be different for each one. We are certainly cognizant of existing metagames. In all work we do, we're cognizant of existing metagames. That's something we have to have a very, very strong finger on the pulse of to effectively do our jobs and create new cards. So that's certainly part of the supplemental set process as well. But I don't think it's like an outsized part of the supplemental set. I think that's just always something that's going on in the background.
Last thing I want to ask you before we do the fun go again, unhinged, crazy stuff. You already swore on the main show, so that's out the window.
Yeah, I'm swearing a lot more as I get older. I don't know why. Like I was pretty, my own podcast too. I was essentially mono PG forever, and then I just realized like I fucking love swearing and I want to do it. So you got to bleep me if you have to bleep me, just go for it. Bleep me. That's fine. But I have a great time being a potty mouth, and I'm gonna keep doing it.
That's Mark's job.
Okay.
He has honestly drilled it into my mind that I have to behave. I don't know whether it's algorithm or just because he's got that kind of like Italian nonna mentality if I'm gonna get the spoon if I run my mouth. But
Yep.
ultimately, I think I've been actually quite well behaved for the most part. But
Good for you.
I have been told, I don't know if I'm breaking some sort of rule here, but I have been asked to be on Flesh and Pod, their 69th episode. They want me apparently, which is great. It's nice, but that to me is like a vacation because they said, yeah, you could swear, you can do whatever you want there, and it feels like I've never worn a bra in my life, but everyone I know who has says it's like just taking it off at the end of the day is like such a relief. It's like taking out your contact lenses. Like that's the same thing. You just get this like, and I feel like going on that podcast is how it's going to feel, but we'll get more into the weeds on that later.
I'm excited for you to take your bra off. I think we're all looking forward to that.
Well, I mean, we've shared hotel rooms, you know that there's not much underneath the underneath the surface. So that said, the last thing I kind of want to dig into here real quick on the heavy stuff is there's a lot of chatter and talk and sentiment regarding the Living Legend system, which I think is a pretty interesting system. It's certainly unique, but a lot of players get really attached to certain heroes. And once that hero rotates out, it becomes a very big feels bad, like when Prism rotated out or whatnot. Players eventually just say, dude, like my whole life was this. I invested all my money into the set, and rather than sort of shift into something else, they oftentimes just pick up and leave, whether it's illusionist in general or light illusionist because it's Prism or whatnot, but they get very attached to something. The first question I have is, how does LSS feel about people who are more attached to a particular hero than they are a play style, let's say, a set, or an archetype or whatnot? How does LSS approach design or their plans when people are like, no, I'm a Prism main, I'm going to do nothing more than that?
I mean, I fully embrace that. I think it's one of the best things about our game is that people develop these kind of attachments, relationships, bonds with these heroes. Like you can't ask for more from your IP. Like that is just, you have hit it out of the park where you've made these kind of attachments. Now, is there a problem when those people don't want to play the game anymore? Yeah, that's a problem. Like we should do a better job giving those players more reasons to stick around. And it's so funny. Like, I think some of this comes from the broader gaming culture and the fact that so much of gaming culture is rooted in video games. Video games are a very immediate medium. Things just happen very quickly, weekly patches, all that stuff. There's no real wait time. You can't do that in TCGs. Now, can we get better at lead time and like having replacement options available? Probably. I think that's something where like we could better predict when heroes are about to hit the bench and make sure that we don't just like lose players forever and give them some replacement option. That seems like a pretty reasonable ask to me. But you also got to keep in mind, this is the first go around for the Living Legend system. Like we're just kind of starting to unpack this system. And while it feels like we've been in this for a very long time, I think a lot of that is because of our reduced attention spans and our just desire for this instant gratification, instant fix. And TCGs move slower than that. And that's just the reality of a paper TCG. I think Flesh and Blood will continue to move at a pace which it sometimes is very much at odds with the rest of the modern world. To me, that's part of its charm. It's sort of like calling back to a bygone day, but that's not to say that like having a replacement for a hero that hits Living Legend more readily available wouldn't be a good thing. So I think we're just learning more about the Living Legend system and like how we're supposed to be designing around it, how we're supposed to be empowering players to make the decisions they want to make around their classes, their heroes. And I expect we'll get better at that over time. I will just say that from a personal standpoint, this is like not as part of my work with LSS, it's just me. I wish that there were replacement light illusionists and shadow rune blades available a little bit quicker. But that's like such an easy thing to say and such a hard thing to do.
Right.
And that's the thing I really want to emphasize is it's not that LSS wanted to hang those players out to dry. It's really fucking tough to make a hero, like really hard to make a hero that is exciting and interesting and can stand up to the rigors of millions of players around the world putting it through its paces and grinding out these games after games after games and still have it be fun to play time after time, especially when you're sort of trying to retrofit it into an existing card pool. That's a really big ask. It's really hard. And you're not going to have the benefit of patches down the road. Like, you have to get it right on your first try. So while I am receptive to the players who felt a little hung out to dry, and I wish we could have found a way to like get them their hero back a little bit sooner, I do think it's something we try really hard for, and I hope that eventually those players who have left the game for those reasons come back. That's all I can ask, is like, if they loved it that much at one point, I hope we can find a way to rekindle their love and get them back sitting at the tables.
So the follow-up and the last question I have for this the main episode here is, how much work is already done, how much attention is given, or how much foresight is lent to the like a living legend format? Do you guys have a plan? Is there kind of a situation where it's like, okay, once we get 4 heroes or 6 heroes or 8 heroes, we're going to start launching the format, we're going to release the rules, we're going to have a separate banned and restricted, or is it the Wild West and everything goes? How much thought and actual preparation is already done for the Living Legend system, or the Living Legend format? Sorry.
Like, certainly we all know that like it's something on the horizon at this point. James has talked about it multiple times in multiple places. It's always sort of been this thing that's out there. Again, not going to get into any like specifics or time frames, but we have conversations about the Living Legend format. It is talked about, it is discussed, and I would say, like, we all know we're going to get there eventually, and we're all thinking about when the right time to do it is on a regular basis. It's not something that's like completely forgotten about on the back burner. We're going to strike when the moment's right and, do something exciting with that format.
I love it. I love it. Well, Bryan Gottlieb, designer at LSS, I do appreciate you coming onto the show, my friend. You're always very articulate, very well-versed, and I appreciate the answers that you give. They're well fleshed out. Where can people tweet at you and get mad at you?
Please don't.
Just do it. Just everybody. Just right at them. Just go. You know that game you had where you only opened 1 yellow death touch in your pool and you're like, I wish I had 5 of them? That's his fault. Did you guys know that? It's Bryan Gottlieb's fault. So now's the time.
I did set it up that way. No, I actually really love feedback from players. Like, it means a lot to me, either in person or on Twitter, however you want to get it to me. It's at BRYNGO. If you want to chat with me there, or if you see me at any event, you're always welcome to come up, chat with me, tell me what your thoughts are. I've also been on every Flesh and Blood podcast that has ever existed this week. So I'm sure by the end of this podcast, you're just like, is Bryan week over yet? Like, we have had enough of this shit. Let's go on to the next guy. I don't want
it's sweeps, baby. We got to get the big guns on. That's what it is. So. Absolutely. Well, there you have it, friends. Thank you so much again, Bryan, for being on the show. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you can go ahead and check out the Go Again segment. We're going to hook that up right after this. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, well, you're missing out on a lot of great questions asked by the community, including things like, hey, what is your favorite food that you discovered in New Zealand? And other things like, who the hell needs to shut up in Flesh and Blood? These are all questions that we're going to dig into in the Go Again segment. For everyone else, thank you so much for listening to the Instant Speed podcast. To our wonderful sponsors at Kayfabe Cards, go to kayfabecards.com, as well as BCW Supplies. Use the code ISP10 to get 10% off all of your swag. And what did I miss? Right, Patreon. You guys rock. So there you have it. That's ISP 75 for you guys. Don't forget, you're not losing if you're learning. See you next week on ISP. All right, friends, welcome back. It is Go Again, the Patreon exclusive. So if you're listening to this, hey, thanks for your money and your support, both equally. You guys rock sauce. Yeah, much appreciated. So welcome, friends. I've got a bunch of questions from the community lined up for this clown shoe over here. And if you want to, all together, we can say the F word and get it out of the way. Is that what you want, Bryan?
I apparently brought that energy to the actual podcast as well. So
yes, you did.
I have no problem dropping F-bombs all over the place. So fuckity fuck.
Well, all right. Well, there goes my whole thing. That's what I wanted to say.
Sorry.
Fuckity fuck, he says. Perfect. All right, let's dig into these. There's a whole bunch. I want to get to as many as I can before we end with a fun game. First question is from Roger via Patreon saying, has LSS lifted too much of limited from MTG? For example, why can't booster drafts be 4-packs in this game? Sealed could be 7 to 8-packs. Basically, in MTG, more limited card pools were fine because you had more combinations between the cards you opened or drafted.
Yeah, look, we don't have to do anything that MTG did, and I think we will continue to explore these things. I don't think either of those suggestions would be a particularly good idea. Like I already mentioned, the dangers of making the card pool too big. There is some real problems with it when it comes to Flesh and Blood and the efficiency of blocking cards versus non-blocking cards and sort of the types of games it sets up. But I am very open to exploring novel ways to approach limited formats in Flesh and Blood. And as soon as it makes sense to, as soon as we find one that's exciting, something new we can bring to the table, we're not tied to anything. There's no paradigm where we're like, we have to keep doing things this way. This is the way it's always been done. We're going to stick with it. That doesn't happen at LSS. We want to make the best game possible, and we'll kill any sacred cows we have to do it.
From Sage Husanu asking, depending on what can be answered, 2 questions. Number 1, in Dusk Till Dawn, will the new Light Illusionist / Shadow Runeblade fit the meta purpose as their Monarch counterparts? 2, what is the best flavor win in Outsiders? I believe it's Wander with Purpose. So I guess we'll tackle the first one first here, which is, are these new heroes, the new Light Illusionist, the new Shadow Runeblade, looking to kind of slot in where Chain and Prism left off?
You're not getting any information on this one from me.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
These are James questions. Get James on your show, and you can riddle him with this stuff. That's not my position to give out this kind of information. So I am happy to always talk about this stuff after it's revealed. But if you want to know into the future, you got to talk to the man himself.
Yeah.
As far as the other question, best flavor win, I think Wander with Purpose is a very cool answer for sure. I think that is one of the rare cards where I'm pretty sure the text of that card, as it saw print, was exactly what I put into the card file. Like it was just always wanted to be a cool call out to Katsu and like Benji learning from Katsu. So I'm really happy that card made it through and it's resonating with people. But to me, the biggest flavor win in the set is again, Azuri. Like, it's just a hero I'm completely in love with in terms of gameplay. She feels dangerous. She feels deceptive. She feels like her gameplay embodies the character so well. The whole character just feels like a home run to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I dated a girl like her. She presented the stealth, which was, yeah, we'll get together and we'll move in and have a great life. And then she hits you with the,
Command and conquer.
Yeah. Then she's like, oh, whoops, I'm going back to the hairdressing school in Calgary. It's like, oh, okay, cool story. I got Uzuri'd. Andy Modell asking, a lot of people look at cards being at/above/below value numerically, but how do you go about balancing at the high level, especially when mechanics aren't just numbers?
Not sure I quite follow the question.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Like, I mean, and I've when you're designing a card, obviously you kind of have this, I don't want to say a template, but perhaps it has to go along the lines of, for example, a card like Plague Hive. Plague Hive has, you pitch it for a token that has existed before. Grandeur of Valahai, or the Viscerai specialization. This one is a random effect of 3, and it's also a yellow. So where are we looking at in terms of balancing things that aren't necessarily just X's and O's on a chalkboard, as it were, when there's new or different effects? Because you could kind of associate a particular value or numerical value to something like Go Again along those lines. However, what about when there's interesting different types of effects, like something like a random generation of a token?
Yeah, a lot of it is trial and error, of course. Like, you just have to play with these cards and get a feel and understand how they influence games, how they feel in comparison to other options you could theoretically play in that slot, like something akin to War. Like wins over replacement.
Wins above replacement. Yeah.
Wins above replacement. Yeah, yeah. Something akin to that is kind of one of the best ways I find to analyze these cards. Like, what are they taking the place of? How well are they doing the job? But you're right that when things sort of stray from numbers, it is a different process, and it's a little bit harder. But that's sort of what we're here for. Like, those are the exciting cards to make and balance, and the ones that can really shake up metagames, of which Outsiders I think has a few. So yeah, it's just, design 101. You got to try this stuff out and see what works.
Who is the biggest diva in Flesh and Blood?
Besides Tannen, or
that's
like
fun.
The obvious answer, right? I mean,
I was gonna say Tannen.
do we need another one?
Nah, I was just baiting that one out, man. I left the breadcrumbs and you gobbled them up. For those who don't know, nobody has the bigger list of demands for, like, Tannen needs a very specific type of V8 juice, like, ready to go.
And to be fair, that V8 juice is really good. Like, he's absolutely converted me to it. It's really, really good. But Tannen cannot function without that V8 juice.
Yeah, no, it's like forget it. Like, cancel the show if the V8 juice is not there. Tannen also on the regular. I have begun bringing a second belt to when I pack because he always forgets a belt. The amount of times I've brought, when I go to the venue, I bring my hair gel and stuff as well, or my like hair paste, because he always forgets that also. I get like this random, he's like, I'm going to get there early and it's all good. I'm like, you go early. When you get there, you text me what you forgot and I will bring it for you. That's usually how it goes. that is Tannen Grace. You're not wrong. He is absolutely a diva. Here's somebody, random guy. Have you heard of Pablo Pintor?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah. Pablo Pintor asks, it seems like a lot of people who won their pre-releases played huge decks, like 40-ish plus. Is this intended?
I wouldn't say intended. I would say sort of expected. One of the things with Sealed is that power level of your average card in deck is just lower than draft average power level. A lot of times that means that defensive numbers presented can actually be better than offensive numbers presented. If that is the case, you should pile up. Where that breaks down is that very, very good Flesh and Blood players know how to get larger numbers out of their decks than average players. And I assure you, the tools are there in this set to get those larger numbers. So where you don't know how to do that yet, you don't understand how important it is to play Azalea as a pitch stacking deck and really set up that massive dominate turn at the end of the game, or you don't know that you have to sort of prioritize those Spider's Bites in Arachne or Redline aggro deck, because if you don't, you will get fatigued. But if you're leaking damage consistently and using your Spider's Bites as much as possible, you're going to play a strong second cycle too. If you don't know that yet, it's very easy to get piled out on. I think when you know more, it becomes much harder. And in draft, it becomes way harder, where your cards are just better and better. And that's not to say, like, I don't think fatigue has an influence on games of Outsiders. I think it very much does, but it's the type of fatigue that I really love. It's implied fatigue. It's fatigue by attacking, where you've just offered so much damage to your opponent that you've stripped so many resources from their hand that they've just come down to this desperate, battered state. And it really captures, like, the part of Flesh and Blood that cemented the game's flavor for me. When I first started playing, you get down to that depleted one-on-one battle. You have pieces of armor thrown aside and shattered, and you only are able to claw together your last weak blue attack that you're praying has some way to get through. To me, that creates the best moments in Flesh and Blood. And how many stories are you hearing from Outsiders pre-release weekend of people being like, I was down to the last card in my deck and they had the brush off, but I had the pump spell and was able to force through that last 1 point of damage. You can't have those scenarios presented unless you have the threat of fatigue looming. It has to be something that is exerting influence on games. So one of the things people are going to have to adjust to with Outsiders is they have to actively manage that. And in a format like Uprising, which is the last draft format we played, that's not how things worked. Like that, the damage output was just so intense that you just kind of threw your stuff at your opponent and it almost always got the job done. Very few games came down to fatigue. But if you want those intricate back and forth desperate games, you have to be willing to sort of embrace fatigue as a possibility. And we did with this set. And I think it's for the better as well.
Fab Chile asking you, can he share something about the release of Player versus Environment, PvE?
That's another James question. Gotta go to
son
the
of
big man for that stuff.
I'll call him right now. Tell him that you're
that's in your best bet.
Being a little bitch. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Fine. Sorry.
Okay, you're allowed to swear on this, guys.
I can. Absolutely.
That's what the fucking host told me, so I'll do whatever I want.
You can say whatever the fuck you want. Perfect. Shit. I was actually going to ask something. I asked the diva question, right? Mm-hmm. I did ask the key. Oh, here's a good one. Maybe this is actually, you can sort of fire off on this one. Is casting easy? Because a lot of people think it's easy.
Casting is one of the most mentally draining things I have ever done. I have now years and years of experience. I live flesh and blood. Like it's basically all I do with my days. I work on it constantly, study the game constantly, play the game constantly, and I still mess up shit all the time. So if it's easy, you might be superpowered. I don't know what to tell you. I don't think there are many humans on the face of the earth that could step into the booth and be like, oh, this shit was easy. Like, you're probably not doing a very good job then. It's supposed to be hard work. It's supposed to be intense. It's supposed to be a performance. It's both acting and improvising and being a really, really intelligent card gamer and highlighting personalities and telling stories. It's all those things at the same time. I don't think anything about it is easy.
So I'm gonna hit you with this. You say that's the most mentally taxing thing you've ever done. You've never shared a hotel room with Tannen while the Braves are in the playoffs.
Okay, I could see that being very much of the same nature.
Yeah, it's like Tannen, dude. It's like fucking 1 a.m. I don't care what the pitcher's ERA is on a Tuesday night. Like, my man, let me sleep, dude. Like, please.
I will say, though, in defense of like casting being something very hard, I was a lawyer at an elite New York City law firm, typically like one of the most mentally taxing jobs that people talk about like in the world. So I do think like I have some pretty high comparables to put against casting, and I will tell you casting is harder than that. So.
Oh, really? So, like, you know, doing a top 8 fatigue match is worse than like closing arguments for somebody's.
It can be. It can be harder for sure.
Oh, Lord. Your Honor, we've gone to time, so we're each going to do our last arguments, and then we'll just figure it out. I don't think that works out. All right. Jeffo and Sam George both asking a similar question, which is food-related. What is the most unique food in New Zealand that you had, that you enjoyed, that might not be available in the States or Canada, as well as what is your favorite New Zealand bakery pie?
Yeah, so like my answer feels very boring. Like I want to just talk about Tim Tams, which
dude.
Are also
I had Tim Tams.
They're available in Australia too, and I think I could probably get them in the U.S. if I wanted to. That's the problem with that answer. But they're great, as I'm sure you will confirm.
So what people don't know is that when we did Worlds, the lovely people.
That's right. Yeah, Michelle brought us Tim Tams.
Yeah, she brought us like this box called the Caster Survival Kit, and inside of it, God bless her, because holy crap, there was, first of all, there was like peanut M&Ms, which is basically my fuel. That's the coal you shovel in the furnace. But there were Tim Tams. There's all kinds of other good stuff. I also want to give a huge shout out to Josh Scott, because every time there's an event where we're together, he always brings me chocolate that he knows I love. I forgot what it's called. But I always make it a point to go out for dinner with Josh Scott, usually just the two of us or a couple of us together, because he is like one of my favorite people at LSS. And him and I had a really nice bonding experience where I think it was Worlds, We spent like an hour in a sauna at his hotel, just chilling out in our towels, just talking about life, having a good time, and then we went out for supper. It was such a great time. But yeah, Tim Tams, man. Tim Tams are the shit. They're so good.
They're really good. There's also like some really good restaurants I found while I was down there that I'm looking forward to ordering from again, but that's more like very specific to Aucklanders in the particular part of Auckland I was in, so we could skip that. As far as pies, I've never had one. I never had a New Zealand pie. Actually, when my buddy here in Mr. Classic from LSS was passing through my neck of the woods in America, I made sure to bring him to an orchard by my house and get him a pie as God intended, with fruit in it, not some kind of meat or whatever it is you all put in your pies down there. You have to remember I'm a vegetarian, and I do think the bulk of like the New Zealand pies are meat-based pies. So I've really never had one on offer. I will happily try one though if I ever see a vegetarian option.
As a born and bred Quebecer, meat pies is something that we have. It's called tourtière, and it's delicious. But ultimately, I guess you're right. I mean, if we can get Tim Tams here in North America, then maybe it doesn't count. I guess you want to go get a wallaby, freshly ripe, picked straight from the tree. I think is the best, delicious.
I will say there's beautiful fruit in New Zealand. Like the fruit is very, very good. And their potatoes are actually really excellent. James's wife also loves potatoes. And like she was telling me about her experience with where she just like really grew to appreciate potatoes one day. And I thought it was a really beautiful story because she was like so grateful for the potatoes. And she's right. They are excellent in New Zealand. And I don't really understand why, but now I want to go back and have more New Zealand potatoes.
Like better than like a Yukon Gold or something like that?
I think it was probably like the best potato I ever had. Like it was just delicious.
I'm not a like potatologist or something, so I don't necessarily know. I remember when I was
I can't remember the name of them, but they were just like some, I think, New Zealand specific potato, and they're really, really good.
It's a fucking potato. Like this is when I was bartending, I remember like our managers like, hey, when you're giving out menus, make sure people know that we've got Yukon Gold fries now. I'm like, who the fuck cares? Are you kidding me?
Nobody cares.
Are you shitting me? You're still charging them like $12 for a pint. Like no one's gonna give a fuck what our fries are. Like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, I'm gonna be like, hey, why don't you rock a $13 Bud Light when you're hammering down those Yukon Gold potatoes? That you're yeah, no problem. Because the 14-year-old in the back who's not giving two fucks, he's absolutely taking the time to cook those properly. All right, well, that does it for the Q&A, but I've got a game for you, my friend.
Okay,
and
I'm excited.
I've spent quite a lot of time on this. I'm actually quite proud. I've run this by multiple people, and in the Discord that we are, I really wanted to show everybody, but you're in there, so I couldn't ruin it. So what I need you to do real quick is I need you to open the Discord chat that you and I are in, like just our private chat. I'm going to send you, it's a game. Now, you, like myself, product like born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, right? 90s music means a lot to us, and I think that you, like me, are very well tuned to what 90s music is. So we're gonna play a game. I'm gonna give you a portion of a album from the 90s.
Okay.
And you have to tell me what that album is. I think you can get them. So here's the first bit. So take a look. What album is this?
I think this is Aqua's Barbie Girl.
Very close, actually. It is, unfortunately, it's Aria. It's Aria.
I don't know this album.
Take a quick look at it. Take a very close look at that album.
Who is that? Me in the right corner? Why am I in that?
That is you. That is absolutely you. I told you I took some time today.
I don't remember being in this band, but if I'm there, then I must have had a great time.
You did. You did. It could have been Aqua, but it's actually Aria. We're very close. Here's the second one. So you're 0 for 1 so far.
Yeah,
how about this
one?
one?
Try though.
What band / album is this?
Oh, this is In Sync. Shit, what album is it though? I know it's In Sync. I can't remember the name of the album though.
Well, you got In Sync. That's close enough. Unfortunately, you're also wrong. No, this one is No Bands.
Oh.
No Bands.
I have to say the members of this band far more attractive than I remember. Like they just all look awesome, top to bottom.
Yeah, except for Chris Kirkpatrick. Honestly, there's nothing in the world that I can say to redeem that picture of this douchebag. Like, I'm sorry.
Is he wearing goggles?
Yeah, because right after doing a concert for a bunch of 14-year-olds, he's about to go fly a Spitfire in World War II, apparently.
Well, you know, you got to do what you got to do to make the ends meet.
I'm not going to ask questions. All right, there you go. All right, so you're 0 for 2.
Yeah.
Here's another one. What album or artist is this?
Oh, this is Michael Jackson's Bad, obviously.
Oh, you're so close. No, it's actually Ban. It's not Bad, it's Ban.
I just misremember this album. I could have sworn it was Bad, but now I see how mistaken I was. Next time I'll get it right.
Yeah, the Photoshop on this one, this was probably towards the end of the night.
Yeah, no, this is good. I like this. This might be my favorite one, actually.
Do you still rock the Jerry curl every now and then?
I should grow my hair like that. I'm fantastic in that picture.
Yeah, because that's not going to get a call when you're at a bar the next time. Cool. Yeah, you could also reuse that jacket for like Edward Scissorhands cosplay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 0 for 3. Listen,
I thought I would be better at this. I don't know why I'm struggling so much.
Well, you're gonna get this one. You're absolutely gonna get this one. What album or band is this?
Yeah, NWA, Straight Outta Compton.
Ooh, you're so close. This one is actually Remembrance, Straight Outta Cards. Yeah.
One of these things in this picture is not like the others, and you know I'm all for including me in with NWA. I think I would have been a great fit. But I'm not sure they would have agreed in this instance.
Well, yeah, because you're the only one wearing glasses.
Correct. So that's exactly what I was talking about.
That's the only part that I can put together. All right. Last one, Brian, because this is where you can redeem yourself.
Okay, I'm going to get this one.
You're absolutely going to get this one. It's impossible not to get this one. What album is this? T-Boz, Left Eye.
Left Eye and Chili.
Yeah.
I really wanted to trump this game and actually figure out the joke you were trying to make here, but I unfortunately don't think my superpowers are that good. This is obviously TLC. Is this Crazy Sexy Cool or?
You're very close. You're very close. The album is actually Tie. It's a cool double loss.
Well,
look at you in that picture.
Again, one of these things is not like the others. I'm the only one with a mustache.
No, I believe that T-Boz doesn't have a nose in this picture.
Also true.
Yeah, you're in there again. Grade A Photoshop opportunities.
No, wait. So isn't that Left Eye? I think I replaced T-Boz in this picture.
I don't have the actual like initial one. Trust me, I used Microsoft Paint. You could look it up. Like there was Lisa Left Eye Lopez, and she unfortunately has passed away. So.
Yep.
Rip her. Rest in peace.
You know, they're touring. Like they are playing near me very soon.
Yes, they are. They're playing near me in like a couple months.
I can confirm that I did in fact replace T-Boz in the original here.
Okay.
It's Left Eye on the left-hand side. As you would expect. Of course you would put Left Eye on the left-hand side of the album cover.
Yeah, in my head I was like, no, they're all in order, but the middle one is Chili. And like I was like, anyway, I don't understand. Yeah.
This is why you were not making album covers back in the 90s. You just didn't get it.
I didn't. Because I would have been like, no, you have to be in line. The T and then the L and then the C.
What do you think the best song on Crazy Sexy Cool is?
Was this the album that had an Unpretty on it?
No, that's unlike the 2000 album. The
that
same
was
one
beyond
that had No Scrubs. Actually, I think that came out in 1999. This album, if I recall correctly, came out in 1994.
Crazy Sexy Cool was good. I just can't place the songs, like, because there's like some real bangers, like Unpretty, Waterfalls, obviously.
Yeah, so Waterfalls is on Crazy Sexy Cool, as is Creep.
Red
Light Special.
Oh,
Red Light
yes.
Special, very good.
Give them the red light.
Those are the three bangers on this album.
All through the night. See, this is why we can't cast together, honestly.
Correct.
It's
for the best.
We have cast together, and it was I don't want to say it was a gong show. I think we do a really good job, but I think it's strategic in terms of who is put together. But Worlds is around the corner, man. I'm going to put in a good word for you. That
Okay, I appreciate that.
yeah, I'll see what I can do.
That's good.
But yeah, you have any questions for me before we wrap this up? I don't know.
No, I have no questions. I honestly, I would say I'm exhausted and want to go to bed, but I probably am going to hop on with the folks back in Auckland and talk about things well in the future that I'm sure you and I will get together and talk about in the years to come. And I will tell you when we talk about this set that this is what I was actually referring to in this Go Again segment.
Fine, whatever, man. I like my memory is so short, and my foresight into the future really is just I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, but I know I have an alarm set for some reason, but I'm gonna figure it out tomorrow morning. My
Sure,
man,
it'll be important.
Whatever. Who cares? I love you so much. I do appreciate you doing this, buddy. Thank you so much.
I love you too, brother. And I just want to say one big fuck you before we end everything.
Oh,
because I have the right to. So
you do have the right to. Absolutely. We'll put that one on blast. Let's add some sparklers and some production value to that fuck you. Why not? Friends who have watched Go Again here, you're already Patreon subscribers, so I already have your money. But still, if you want to give me more, it does mean a lot to me. But honestly, your support, fucking awesome. So we are going to creep our way out of here. And that's the segue we got. So thank you so much for watching. Catch you next week on Go Again.
Well, I work